A day at the beach or public pool is one of America's great pastimes. Simple pleasures often taken for granted. But if you are one of several people in the pool at the Monson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida on June 18, 1964, you'd know something as simple as going for a swim once faced violent opposition. On that day, several African Americans and other protesters entered the pool, and the motel's manager, James Brock, poured acid into the water to get them out. For African Americans, the pleasure of swimming in public pools and beaches was not always a right. African Americans were barred entry from many local swimming pools and beaches during the Jim Crow era. Though white-only beaches were plentiful, only a handful of beaches and pools, such as American Beach on Amelia Island, were available to African Americans. But even as public beaches and pools began to desegregate following World War II, black use of public swimming spaces was often met with state-supported intimidation and violence. Starting in the 1950s, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People launched a nationwide call to action. Similar to the famous lunch counter sit-ins, these swim-ins and wade-ins challenged segregation in public pools and beaches. In 1959 in Biloxi, Mississippi, over 125 African Americans gathered for a wade-in at a segregated beach in town and were attacked by a violent white mob. The New York Times called it the worst race riot in the state's history. The Monson Motor Lodge swim-in was among the most famous of these protests. Though the protesters were luckily unharmed by the acid, the incident made global news and raised awareness about the violence that African Americans often experience fighting for full equality. Protests at beaches and pools were among many events in the fight for equal access to all aspects of American life that ultimately led President Lyndon B. Johnson to sign the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law alongside Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The law's passage made racial segregation illegal in schools, employment, and public accommodations like swimming pools and beaches, helping ensure that the leisure enjoyed by many would be available to all. For more stories, subscribe to our channel.